Hello, welcome to another edition of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're your Steelers beat writers, Chris Carter, Brian Batko, and as always, this show is presented by FanDuel Sportsbook, the number one sportsbook in America. We'll have all your odds, ends, and lines on the Steelers-Bengals matchup that's coming up 1 p.m. this Sunday at Acrisure Stadium later in the show. We want to give a thanks to our sponsors at Edgar Snyder Associates. You know, they also do workers' compensation. When you've been hurt on the job, you need to know who decides when you're better, who decides when your treatment's over, who decides when your benefits are over. The answer might surprise you. It's the insurance company's doctors. They won't be on your side. Get someone who is on your side. That's Edgar Snyder Associates. Call them today at 1-800-94-EDGAR. They're a fight for the rights that you deserve. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. Brian, at the top of the season, we got the impression the Steelers built their secondary on the idea that they could run and cover with Joey Porter Jr., Darius Slay, and Jalen Ramsey against any receiving core, and particularly the Bengals receiving core, because that was the one they were going to face twice this season and arguably the best in the NFL. That did not happen the last time. They went out and lost, I believe, 33-31 in that game, and particularly because Ja'Marr Chase had a career day against them. And for Ja'Marr Chase to have a career day, it means he put up even more insane numbers than he normally does. So since then, the Steelers have flipped what they've done. And when I look at sports information systems and I look at tendencies and I'm trying to see what teams are doing, through weeks 1 through 8, the Steelers used the 9th highest rate of one high safety looks. Now, one high safety looks, of course, means one high safety, not having two guys back. So less support for cornerbacks back there, leaving more one-on-one coverages across the board.
Go ahead, throw on us. We dare you.
Exactly. Come on, bring it. And in those 8 games, they used 2 high safety looks 45% of the time. That was the 25th highest rate of using that formation. But when you flip to the last 2 weeks, that has flipped. They have used 2 high safety shells looks 52% of the time. That's the 12th highest rate in the NFL. And 1 high safety looks just 35% of the time. That's 19th. So they went from using the 25th the 25th ranked 2 high safety looks through 8 weeks. And then after that Packers game, they switched it to this more 2 high safety look that places them close to being a top 10 team and using that. And it seems, again, partially because of how the Bengals played them. And I guess the big thing is Brian, can that change make them ready for this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to the coverage schemes there, Chris, it's also just a lot of different personnel from last time they played the Bengals. Their kind of main mode of operation in that one in Cincinnati on Thursday Night Football was Jalen Ramsey was still the slot corner, and then Joey Porter Jr. and Darius Slay were on the outside. And your safety tandem was Deshaun Elliott and then mostly Chuck Clark with a little bit of Juan Thornhill, depending on what personnel grouping they wanted in there. A bunch of the guys I just named have either moved positions or are out for this game or have essentially been benched by the Steelers. So now you've got Jalen Ramsey in there as the free safety who maybe he can allow them to throw the Steelers. He can allow the Steelers to throw the Bengals a little bit of a curveball if they want to go back to more of that single high, because I think you kind of trust him to erase any of the issues that pop up in front of him, more so than you did Juan Thornhill or Chuck Clark previously. But Kyle Duggar is in the mix now. And, I still feel like as much as he's helped stabilize is the word that Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin have used this week, he wasn't playing in New England for a reason. So I expect teams to try to attack him and go after him in coverage, depending on where he is. And then I think your cornerback trio is going to be Joey Porter Jr., James Pierre on the outside, and Brandon Echols in the slot, who needs to be better than he was against the Chargers. Now, I think Ladd McConkey is, a much tougher challenge than Andre Yoshivas, but we know the Bengals want to spread you out. Joe Flacco is going to get the ball out quick, find the open guy, and obviously they want that open guy to be Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins more often than not.
Right. You want them to not just be getting easy looks to these guys, make them have to earn those yards with them. And that's something they really didn't do a whole lot in the first matchup. A lot of their looks were and there were some that were like Jalen Ramsey was pretty tight in coverage on that last deep ball to Tee Higgins that basically won the Bengals the game. But there were plenty of other plays that set things up and I think you're right. Like the Bengals would be smart to go after the guys that the Steelers are moving around a lot, or the guys that the Steelers are kind of adapting. I mean, so far in the Steelers defense, when they played the Colts and the Chargers, two offenses that I think are well respected, Kyle Duggar's been targeted one time, and he allowed a catch of 2 yards. Now, maybe that's because he's been really good in coverage and people have avoided him. Though I guess this charting for PFF, there's actually one time where he was targeted and I thought it was incomplete. So I guess maybe
I was going to say that was the Colts game. He had sticky coverage on Tyler Warren, I think. So
right. So that's PFF's numbers. I think they're missing some there, but still, I mean, he hasn't been picked on. And then you look at James Pierre. We've talked about his numbers a lot. He's been targeted 12 times this year. He has 6 breakups. He's been pretty solid there. And granted, that's in spots where he's not necessarily going up against a premier receiver. He's in a spot where maybe he should be winning, but he's been doing it well. And so I do think it'll be interesting to see how the Bengals try to pick at this secondary that doesn't give you as many one-on-one looks without help behind them. Because if they do that, I think that gives the Steelers more room to be aggressive and underneath and take away those quick reads, those primary reads for Joe Flacco, make him hold on to the ball. And then this game does get back to being about, can the Steelers pass rush win and it not need to win in 2.5 seconds.
Yeah, and just for reference, Pro Football Reference has Kyle Duggar targeted once with 0 completions allowed. So I think that lines up a little bit more with what we've seen. But I think for as much as we're going to talk about the receivers and the corners in this game, and rightfully so, one, because of the performance that was put on by the Unks in the first edition of the Icy Hot Bowl, winging the ball around. But two, I mean, just there's so many much maligned players in this game. The Bengals defense has been historically bad, and the Steelers secondary is going through it and still trying to find answers. So yeah, you absolutely do look at it kind of as this could be a shootout, the old OK Corral between Aaron Rodgers and Joe Flacco. But the other part of that too is this isn't a 7-on-7 game. There's going to be guys up front trying to wreck the game and cause havoc. And I think for the Bengals, if they can have Amarius Mims hold up against TJ Watt one-on-one at least some of the time, and Orlando Brown Jr. hold up one-on-one against Nick Herbig and Alex Highsmith at least some of the time or all of the time, then they can get a little bit more double help on Cam Heyward, Keanu Benton, Derek Harmon, because I think the interior of that Bengals line is actually the weak point of it. Mims and Brown haven't always been great this year, but pedigree is there for those two former first-round picks at tackle. Pedigree's not there as much for a couple of rookie guards and center Ted Karras, who's a veteran, but from when I talked to people in Cincy, has not been having a good season at all there protecting. So this could be a game where, quick pressures from Heyward and even more so Keanu Benton, who I'm still not in love with how he's playing the run, but I mean, his pass rushing juice is coming out in a major way in recent weeks. So if he can win quickly some of those one-on-one matchups when he doesn't get 4 hands on him, that'll allow the Steelers to get pressure, maybe with just 4. Joe Flacco can't step up and find the open guy down the field or bomb it to Chase or Higgins, and boom, then you're talking about, hey, it's actually the front 4 that helped us win this game rather than our back end holding up with all of these new faces shuffling it.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting thing with the Steelers defense is the continued changes. Like, this team seemed like it was going to blitz at all costs early on, and now you're seeing them blitz less in the recent games as well. Like, they're trusting their front to win more often, which is funny because that was, I think, a criticism of them in the Teryl Austin era, was that they stopped being Keith Butler blitzing defenses. Keith Butler, and Dick LeBeau were known for sending heat from the left side, from the right side, from everywhere.
And they were leading the league in sacks every year.
Exactly. And that's the thing. They led the league in sacks. That was their whole thing. And Teryl Austin came in and they stopped leading the league in sacks. But they were able to kind of, I think, shore up some other things. And they were still able to get to quarterbacks. And so they came into this season thinking, all right, let's ramp that up a little bit. But clearly that hasn't worked. Teams have countered that very well. They've been able to kind of work their way around it. And now they're kind of getting back to maybe blitzing a bit less. I think that's a lot of things. For example, in those weeks 1 to 8 that I was talking about earlier, they a sports information system has them blitzing 34% of the time. That's third highest among all the teams in the last 2 weeks.
And without looking, I feel like that's a big uptick from the Steelers in recent seasons.
Yes. Oh yeah. Like the Steelers, I think we're like maybe closer to the middle of the league in the under Teryl Austin for most of Teryl Austin's years. So like them being top 3 again, which is where they kind of were in a lot of Keith Butler years, that was a big change. But again, in the last 2 weeks, now you're seeing it back to kind of where Teryl Austin's levels historically were. They blitz 28% of the time. That ranks 14th in the last 2 weeks. And again, 2 weeks is a small sample size. We got to see how things continue to play out. But I think this is a trend that goes with those personnel changes you were talking about and just the stylistic changes the Steelers have made because it's Mike Tomlin said before, adapt or die. And I think that they've had to realize, the first Bengals game, we can say, okay, you know what, we got cooked by these guys, but we can come out against the Packers and we can do that. When the Packers cooked them too, especially in the second half, then it was kind of like, all right, we gotta do something different because clearly this plan did not work. And I think through 2 weeks, the plan has made sense. They got cooked up by Ladd McConkey, but that was like you were pointing out. It was kind of just Brandon Echols just losing in some coverage moments. But by and large, they weren't giving away easy completions left and right the way they had been in several weeks this season. So I think that there's a chance that the Steelers, these changes could be right for what they need to do against the Bengals, but it has to show up this week. If it doesn't make an impact in this game, and they still give up 30-plus points, there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. There's going to be a lot of questions, and I think there's going to be a lot of doubt heading into what's going to be a gauntlet of opponents coming up in a couple weeks.
Yeah, and I think you could even argue that the gauntlet starts now because even though the Bengals are 3-6 and playing just really bad ball, horrendous ball on the defensive side, they are coming off their off week, so they've got extra rest. And if there were ever a time for them to figure out something to get it to mask the talent deficiencies for them on the defensive side, this would be it. But going back to the other side, when you're not blitzing, you got to be able to get pressure with 4. And when you're the Steelers, that means it's time for a vintage TJ Watt game. Doesn't it feel like we're due for a vintage TJ Watt game where he just has Amarius Mims in the blender and, we're seeing shots of Mims, looking sad on the sideline, holding his helmet after giving up a strip sack. So it feels like we're due for that, but I think TJ's had a disappointing season thus far, and I don't even think he would necessarily disagree with that. So, I don't blame you if you're skeptical that that's all of a sudden going to happen here in week 11. Yeah,
week 11. No, I hear you there, and whereas he's had a sack in 6 of his last 7 games, I do agree that like you'd think he'd have more with the way things have gone this season. I think right now he has 6 sacks in the season. Sure, that leads the team, but it doesn't have him leading the NFL right now. It doesn't have him, in a lot of years he's been that guy that's led the NFL. Right now the leaders are Brian Burns and Myles Garrett with 11. So he's almost halfway. He's a little over halfway there to them. And so, but having a big game like this can be the things that prop you up. Myles Garrett has a 5-sack game. That's the difference between them right now.
And that's how they beat the Colts. They got after Daniel Jones and they got the ball out.
Fumble.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that would be a big week for this to happen. Let's talk about the offensive side of the ball and give you our predictions here for the Steelers playing the Bengals here in Pittsburgh at Acrisure Stadium. We'll cover all of that on the other side of this break here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Brian Batko. But first, I want to remind you that this show is also sponsored by Olivian Numismatic Rarities. If you've got old gold or jewelry collecting dust, turn it into instant cash safely and securely by going to Olivian Numismatic Rarities right here in Pittsburgh's Shadyside neighborhood. Gold prices are at historic highs right now, and O&R pays top dollar for your unwanted gold, silver, and coins. Stop by their premier gallery at 5833 Ellsworth Avenue in Shadyside or learn more at onrcoins.com. That's onrcoins.com or call them today at 412-900-COIN. We're also brought to you by Goldberg, Persky, and White. If you were diagnosed with mesothelioma or lung cancer, call your local attorneys at Goldberg, Persky, and White. For over 40 years, their firm has represented thousands of lung cancer and mesothelioma victims. Call 1-800-COMPLEX or visit gpwlaw.com for a free consultation. All right, Brian, let's talk offense before we get to our predictions, and I'll give the FanDuel odds numbers in a bit here when we do that. But this offense stunk up the joint last week. Aaron Rodgers, I think, looked a shell of what he even had been for most of this season for the Steelers. Jaylen Warren, averaged 5 yards per carry, but felt like maybe he could have gotten involved a bit more before the game got out of hand. Is this offense cooked, or do you think this could be the get right week that actually gets them back on track to help them figure out the things they need to figure out?
No, I don't think this offense is cooked. It was concerning, but I'm not going to write off Aaron Rodgers and company after one really horrendous game against what I think is a pretty good Chargers defense.
That's true.
I think they failed to kind of exploit some of the mismatches they might have had, and things snowballed on them quickly. But I could easily see them bouncing back against this Bengals team that can't really cover, can't really tackle, can't really get pressure. So that's why you're second worst in the league against the run and the pass. And, you put those two things together and you've got the worst defense in the NFL. Congratulations, Cincinnati. So, Pat Freiermuth always dominates this matchup, even when the defensive coordinators change from year to year. It feels like DK Metcalf is going to break out here at some point again, but it's going to be really interesting to see him against DJ Turner because, that's the Bengals' probably lone bright spot on defense this year is the play of their young corner out of Michigan. Was he second or third year guy and had a good game against the Steelers last time. He was the one who came up with that sort of goofy interception along the sideline that they reviewed for a while. DK Metcalf, who you and I know as well as anybody, Chris, loathe to discuss players on opposing teams or even just how opposing defenses are going to play him. And yet he's like, yeah, he's a good asked about DJ Turner. He's a good corner. I hope he follows me again this week. I've been in the lab. I know he has too. So hopefully he can follow me all game like he did last time. And I'm looking forward to that matchup. And I'm thinking, poor DJ Turner, you're either going to get cooked by DK Metcalf or
beat up.
DK is going to, or DK is going to absolutely slam you out of frustration at some point. So it's a lose-lose situation for you, my guy.
But I do think that's you're absolutely right. I can't tell you how many times where I've been like, oh, this matchup, Christian Gonzalez, this guy.
We won Sauce Gardner, obviously
exactly.
One of the best corners in the league, and he's like, no, I'm not gonna go there. It's like, okay.
And it's just like, man, I was so shocked to see that when he said that, I was kind of, my eyes was like, excuse me, you talk about other corners now?
But I remember specifically week one, I was like, do you think Sauce is going to shadow you? And he's like, it doesn't matter. It's not about what they do. It's about what we do. So if he's willing to say even that relatively innocuous comment about DJ Turner, I feel like DK is seething inside ahead of getting this rematch.
Certainly seems that way. But one thing I looked at and I thought was really interesting too was how the Steelers, I asked them about, when teams double DK, what do you guys got to do better? Aaron Rodgers said we got to run better routes, but we got to execute. He's like, he also talked about himself. Pat Freiermuth saying that, like, hey, we have the details ready for that. We know teams want to take him away. We actually have to do it. We have to work it out. And there were times where Pat Freiermuth was open. There were times where Jonnu Smith was open and just missed. There was times where Darnell Washington was open, and there's times where Calvin Austin was open and he dropped it. And so the Steelers have to capitalize on those opportunities when they get them, because I know they don't have a premier wide receiver too, but they have other guys who can catch the football and be dangerous with it in their hands. They just need them to actually follow through on it.
They have MVS, but I don't think MVS is going to be playing yet this week. I really don't.
No, It seems like he's going to take some time to ramp up.
I'll tell you, he might be back though. Scotty Miller. I mean, he's practicing in full with that finger injury. He hasn't done much this season, but anybody can get it against the Bengals defense. So whatever. Does Scotty Miller have anytime touchdown scorer odds on FanDuel? Because I might put put a dime on it.
Let's look at that real quick as we do it. We'll
and
take
Roman Wilson's been playing better too. So I mean, he could he could continue his sort of mini hot streak, if you want to call it that. And I think what Roman's been wanting to happen for himself too is get it done in a win and get it done in sort of a weighty moment, because it's been good to see production for Roman Wilson, but a lot of it's been kind of empty, hollow, garbage time production. He had a couple catches against the Bengals the first time, but he needs to get it back on track. What's up?
Scotty Miller has plus 2,700 odds. He is the least likely player to score. They have Keshawn Williams ranked ahead of him.
Well, watch. Scotty Miller won't even be active. They'll be like, he needs another week to recover from the surgery. But hey, I'm telling you,
Connor Heyward is a plus 1,500.
Just put a buck on Scotty Miller, man. Feels like he's ready to come back. All this MBS talk, he's gonna get it done.
Those numbers.
Keyshawn Williams could return a punt. That would count, I guess. But actually, I don't know if Keyshawn Williams is still. I don't even know if he's still going to be the punt returner after the muff against the Chargers.
Yeah. People get put in dog houses, but these odds, ends, and lines are brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. On top of the touchdown odds, the Steelers are 5.5-point favorites right now. That has been maintained all throughout the week. The money line has slightly moved a little bit more towards the Bengals, but the Steelers are still favorites at minus 240. The Bengals at plus 198. The over/under went from 50.5 points to 49.5 points. So get all those there. Can you guess who the Steelers' #1 touchdown odds scorer is for this game?
Jaylen Warren.
Correct. He's at minus 165. And listen, Brian, I think that might be the Vegas odds being like, give him the doggone ball, because Jaylen Warren makes plays. We saw he was the Steelers' best weapon last week. I think he's been the Steelers' best weapon all season whenever he's out there.
Other than Chris Boswell.
It's true. The serial killer, as Mike Tomlin calls him. But I look at Jaylen Warren and I think that, I hear Mike Tomlin that you don't want to run. He doesn't want to run the wheels off Jaylen Warren. I know our guy Ray Fittipaldo wrote about it's time to do that, but I get the sense that we like this guy. We don't want him to be gone in 2 years because we just give him 2,000 touches and wear him down. We think that he can be a guy for longevity. But at the same time, you need to make plays. And when you have an opportunity, you have a guy out there that's feeding off of your offensive line, that's figuring out the chemistry. I think that can do a lot for your offense. And I think it's been notably pointed out by a lot of people, the Steelers didn't use him once in third downs. And granted, Kenneth Gainwell is a good third down back. I think he got open plenty of times in third downs. That's not Kenneth Gainwell's fault that they didn't convert on those situations. But Jaylen Warren against a defense, like you said, that's so poor tackling, and they traded away their top linebacker in Logan Wilson before the deadline.
They already benched him, but yeah.
Right. But they're giving up the most rushing yards per game, the most yards per game, the most total yards per game, the most yards per play. They are terrible in so many respects. This needs to be a week where the offensive line gets on it, Jaylen Warren gets on it, and then you yourself, the Steelers offense, you find your pace that makes you a competitive offense again. At one point, the Steelers were the 11th ranked scoring offense just a few weeks ago in the NFL. They're back down to 16th. Where they are because of how they've played of late. They need to get back on it as a unit, and a game against an historically bad Bengals defense. Literally, they're on pace to give up the most yards in the last 25 years of football per game. This is a big chance to kind of set the ship right and get things going, because the Bears, they have to go to Chicago next, and then they start that gauntlet of Ravens, Bills, Lions, all those teams. You got to play in Cleveland still. Lots of those games coming up. That's going to be where you're going to get tested in a big way.
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals are giving up 5.4 yards a carry. Only the Bills and the Giants more. Jaylen Warren rolls out of bed and travels 5.4 yards in the morning. So Kenny Gainwell's a good player, but he's not Jaylen Warren, in my opinion. And then the other factor here, I got an email from the chief meteorologist of Roto Grinders, which I don't know if he's any better at that job than, the meteorologist at KDKA or WPXI or whatever here in Pittsburgh. But he said steady winds of 15 miles per hour Sunday in Pittsburgh. And gusts up to 30 to 35. So maybe even more of a day for the running game and, not really trying to air the ball out too much. But I guess we'll see. It's going to be another, I guess I'll say, spotlight or microscope on the field at Acrisure Stadium because Pitt Notre Dame playing 24 hours before. And we know that has been a point of contention with Aaron Rodgers and other players on both teams. So hopefully the field is in decent enough shape for Chris Boswell kicking, guys finding their footing, all of that stuff as well on a huge football weekend.
On a huge football weekend, Pitt's got a ranked game against Notre Dame, like you said, and Pat Narduzzi thinks it's okay if they lose by 100 to this one because they're not an ACC opponent. That I think it's going to be certainly a doozy out there at Acrisure Stadium. But let's talk about this game.
I don't know what this means. That one of the most famous Pitt Notre Dame moments over the years, of course, is Tyler Palko. In his "I'm so proud of this effing football team." He's going to be at the Pitt Notre Dame game, and then the next day, who do the Steelers face? Tyler Palko's old backup, Joe Flacco. So I don't know what that means, if anything.
Fate.
But
that's what it means. It's fate for these two teams. That's right. My dad said he once went to the blue and gold game where it was Palko versus Flacco, and my dad was like, "That guy Flacco is a lot better than Palko. I don't know why why he's the number 2 quarterback." And then he went on to become Joe Flacco, and Palko.
Well, he wasn't from the whippy old number 1, and I don't know. I feel like Joe Flacco just seemed like kind of a goofy name.
It was a goofy name. He was
a big gangly. He was a big gangly 6'5" guy. I'm sure he was kind of a string bean as a freshman in college. So,
I bet you he didn't have the swagger. Palko did have swagger to him, especially at the college level. And Flacco was always kind of a weirdo. But all right, let's get to the predictions of this game. As we said, FanDuel has the Steelers as 5.5-point favorites. Brian, how do you see this game playing out? And give us your final score prediction.
Yeah, I mean, wind or no wind, I do think it's going to be high scoring again. I think both these defenses, especially the secondaries, are going to be stressed by 2 veteran quarterbacks who, they are going to be dialed in, I think, because Flacco's trying to just keep the seat warm now until Joe Burrow can get back in it. So he's on borrowed time. Aaron Rodgers, I can't imagine this was a fun week for him after the way that he played out in LA. Did you know he's 0-5 now in his career in Los Angeles?
He's also 0-5 now against Jim Harbaugh.
I didn't realize that either. Yeah, he struggled against the Niners over the years too, huh?
Aqib Talib pointed that out on a show. He was like, Aaron Rodgers always struggled, because they were saying this, he's cooked, and that was one thing that Aqib Talib said to back him up. He was like, "Listen, I'm not saying the Steelers are going to win the Super Bowl, but he's like, that's a good football team." And he said that historically Aaron Rodgers never does well. And then I looked it up. The 4 times he played the Jim Harbaugh with the Niners, it was always losses, and they gave him problems. So I was like, oh, good on you, Aqib Talib, for noting that. I didn't even think about going to their past clashes in the NFC.
Yeah, especially because Jim Harbaugh, he's an offensive guy, but I feel like if any offensive guy, especially one who actually played QB, like Jim Harbaugh, like the most defensive offensive guy in my mind for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, he's 0-5 in LA, including 2 losses to both the LA teams in college at Cal. So it's kind of, I guess, not ironic, but funny that he lives there in Malibu now year round, which he never wins there. But he does win in Pittsburgh, sometimes half the time, at least, I guess, this year, more than half the time. But I think he wins in Pittsburgh again this weekend. His buddy Pat McAfee will be in town for the Pitt Notre Dame game as well.
True.
So I'm going to go Steelers 33, Bengals 24. But who are we kidding? It wouldn't surprise me if the Bengals find a way to win this game coming off an extra week of rest and the Steelers down in the dumps after the Chargers game. But I'll go ahead and sort of use the Colts game as Exhibit A. This team often bounces back even when they're down bad. So give me the Steelers and the Steelers to cover.
Yeah, I'll take the Steelers to cover as well. I'm going to go 42-20 for the Steelers.
Ooh,
I think the defense scores a touchdown and sets them up with some turnovers in this game. But I think
the bottom could fall out for Flacco here even before Burrow returns.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, one thing the Steelers have sacked the Colts. They sacked the Colts, I think, 6 times, and the Chargers 5 times. So like they've ramped up taking away those early reads. But again, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, younger quarterbacks, athletic quarterbacks that can take that kind of stuff. I don't know if Joe Flacco can take being sacked that much in a game and still be able to keep rocking the way that he does.
Sometimes the younger, more athletic quarterbacks are trying to run around too, though, and then they end up getting sacked. Whereas Flacco, I mean, he's just going to be, let me get it out before I can. And then you got to tackle the catch if they do that. So.
Right. And also be playing those plays. Like, this would be a nice week. My call that I'm making, James Pierre pick 6. Of all the people to get a pick 6, I think Joe Flacco just sees heat coming. He's been hit a few times. He throws a quick pass, and James Pierre is just sitting on like a low buzz zone underneath. And it's just like a classic William Gay, like, oh, thank you. You weren't even looking. You just threw that anticipating that we'd leave that open. But I'm going to jump this now and walk into the end zone for like 30 yards. I could totally see that happening. So there's your call. There's another one.
I was going to say, I've got a Scotty Miller touchdown, and Chris has a James Pierre pick 6. Don't say we don't make bold predictions or go out on a limb on the North Shore Drive.
Boom, baby. Also, FanDuel has the Steelers defense at plus 650 for making an anytime touchdown right now. So there you have it. There's all your predictions there. Brian and I both have the Steelers winning and the offense being able to do enough against the Bengals. But we will be at Acrisure Stadium covering this game live all Sunday. We also have our Pitt team, Stephen Thompson and Abby Schnabel covering Pitt Notre Dame this weekend. There's a lot of action going on. Get it all at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Thanks again for tuning into the North Shore Drive podcast. Keep it here for Sunday after the game, where Ray and Jerry will be breaking it down and what happened in Steelers Bengals. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.